powers must act together, because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems.
चुन चुन करके हिसाब लेना ये मेरी फितरत है.
Why should it be a problem? If I'm smart enough to have multiple options, you should be admiring me.
भारत झुकने वाला भी नहीं.
The rise of India will be determined by India. It will be determined by our strength, not by the mistakes of others.
The old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and in this video we are going to talk about India and Indonesia pivot. India's pivot to Indonesia is actually scaring China. Whether they may admit it or they may not admit it, but it is scaring. It is a worrisome thing for China. There are many reasons for it, and that's what we are going to talk about in this video. But just as a historical backdrop, if you look into it, then you found that when Japanese Prime Minister Takashi, I can't remember her name, when she was visiting, then right after that, India-Japan summit that happened, then right after that, your Chinese statement came. Chinese were like, oh, they should not be, the BU meeting should not target any third party and this and that, all that, right? So somewhere in this whole entire thing, it is pretty clear that China definitely keeps a very close watch on these meetings, these summits that India has with its neighbors. Okay, so the question really is that why India and Indonesia are suddenly moving very closer, and why China is concerned about it, right? See, the answer lies in the strategic dependencies. There is a framework that I have developed. The framework is called Dependency, Vulnerability, Solution, and Consequences. And dependency here is that Indonesia controls around 42% of the world's nickel production and holds around world's largest nickel reserves. Why nickel is important? Nickel is important for electric vehicle batteries, semiconductors, advanced manufacturing, and all that. And over the past few years, I would say the entire decade, Chinese companies have invested more than $30 billion in Indonesia's nickel industry. So this created a very big dependency for Indonesia, that Indonesia needed investment, but Indonesia couldn't simply get it from multiple sources. It got it from China. And that gave China enormous influence over world's most critical mineral supply chains. And now you see, because China's trade with ASEAN countries, especially Indonesia and all, is very huge. It's almost like $980 billion. Okay. And because of all this, if you look into it, then this is why China has from the get-go wanting to bypass the Strait of Malacca. Because of this $980 billion trade, so that the Strait of Malacca doesn't become a choke point for that $980 billion of trade. That's why Chinese have been doing lots of things, which we are going to talk about in this video later on. Okay, so stay with me till the end. Now, that's the China problem for Indonesia. Now, India, on the other hand, faces a different challenge. Nearly 50% of India's trade, almost all of its trade with East Asia, passes through Strait of Malacca. And one of those key trade is the key trade corridor is Vladivostok-Chennai corridor, right? So, and that makes Strait of Malacca actually world's busiest maritime choke points. And I mean, if I just give you the number, then every year almost 90,000 ships carrying roughly, say, 1/4 of the globally traded goods, they transit through that passage. Okay, That's how much. Almost, I think the 82%. That's the number. Okay, so what happened is a recent Strait of Hormuz debacle that happened. This has caused concern to everyone that there are point of conflicts, or say convergence or divergences in that region too, in Singapore, Thailand, where US and China collide. uh, so this has been a concern, and at the same time, if you look into it, then you find that China is also trying to reduce its dependence on Malacca, like I said earlier, right, through the project like China Myanmar Economic Corridor. The new corridor Chinese have been working on is China Bangladesh Myanmar Economic Corridor. And then Chinese were trying to build a Thailand proposed land bridge also, that would connect directly the Sea of Thailand to the Indian Ocean near the Andaman Island. So for India, it is a matter of national security. So securing Malacca is becoming a strategic necessity for India, and for Indonesia, reducing excessive dependence on China becomes equally important. And this shared dependency basically brings the two countries together. Now you have to understand this. India is a future superpower, whereas Indonesia is the fourth largest economy of the future. By 2050, Indonesia's economy is going to be the fourth largest economy in the world. And imagine that's the second, the I would say top three economies. China will be the number one economy, US will be number two, India will be number three, and Indonesia will be number four. And out of those four, three are in the same region. Now you can understand the importance of this region, of that region, right? So this is the whole thing, okay? And this is why this story, that this video is important. Okay, so stay with me till the end, and I'm going to tell you certain very important things where that will help you actually understand the whole entire game, the game that why China is watching this partnership very carefully. Okay, so let's get going, let's get started. Please do like and subscribe, and let's talk about things. Okay, see, the reason number one why China is worried is India's stationary aircraft carriers. So this program, India had actually came up with this idea of using the island chains that are around the Indian Ocean. So India figured that if India uses those island chains to its advantage, then India really won't need aircraft carriers. Or let me be more diplomatic here, that India can actually optimize the aircraft carrier requirement, and India will buy some time this way. So this way, India can actually have three or four or five aircraft carriers, but in different regions. And for that particular region, these island chains that India called its stationary aircraft carrier will serve the purpose. Okay, that was the whole entire plan. All right, now, so this is why, because of this idea, the India's greatest advantage in the Eastern Indian Ocean wasn't the warship, it was a geography. And this is because of this whole idea, India started to develop the Andaman Nicobar Island that sit at the entrance to Southeast Asia and host India's only tri-service command. So, so the advantage of these stationary aircraft carriers was that, unlike aircraft carrier, they cannot be sunk, and they don't need any kind of special deployment, or they can operate year round. They don't have to worry about adding extra fancy technology or anything, all that. So that's why that's a brilliant idea, and this is why India figured that, okay, it's time, considering India's maritime activities are growing by the day. So at this point, I think this is the perfect time that India develops these stationary aircraft carriers. Now let me actually show you in the map what I'm talking about. All right. So let me share my screen real quick. And so now, as you can see right here, right? So these are the island chains right here, the whole entire island chain, all this, okay? That's in that region. Now, if we let me zoom into it this way real quick, okay? Now, as you can see, right? So this is Sabang in the Indira Point. These are all island chains, right? And this is what India is talking about using. And this is where India is developing on this island right here. India has its tri-service command right here. So what India is planning to do is that India is planning to use this island chain as well at this point. So what do we see? What we are seeing is that then India can actually use this area to secure right here. You see that the entry point is Strait of Malacca right there. So India can actually provide the maritime security directly. Even if say there is a plan to establish a land bridge here also, which we will talk about later on in the video, but India can actually watch this whole entire region without even having lots of aircraft carriers. Okay, and then if you go into this region also, so this is so this is right here. See Lakshadweep Islands. These are all island chains right here. So right here, this is it's not visible here very clearly, but anyways, so this is the whole idea behind it. Okay, that use these island chains as an aircraft carrier and further develop it. Okay, and that's number one reason that India wants to do it, and this is why the whole entire deal with Indonesia is the Sabang port development. What is that Sabang port? Let me actually show you in the map again. That the Sabang port that we developed, that India is developing, is right here. You see this? So this is Sabang port right here. So India and Indonesia are planning to develop this thing together, and this is the Indira point. This is the last point of Nicobar Island, and the distance between them is 100 kilometers. Okay. So this is what this is the port that they're gonna develop, and that's what the meeting is all about. Okay. Now, so what exactly happens with this whole Andaman Nicobar plus Sabang together form when they are connected? What happens is that when you connect them together, then Andaman Nicobar and Sabang, they form a strategic network, okay, spanning both sides of Malacca approach. Okay, India has a permanent tri-service presence, Indonesia logistical and naval access at Sabang. Now when they develop this thing, then what do you see? What we are going to deal with is Indonesia is there. Then you are dealing with Indonesian Navy. Then you have Indian Navy, and that forms a very rock solid maritime security architecture. So together with Indonesia, India can then start to provide the net security in the whole entire Eastern Indian Ocean. And this is the foundation of India's Indonesia pivot. Now, why China is worried about this whole thing? See, China is worried because, now let me show you again in the map. Okay. So, what was happening here is this, and pay attention to this. Okay. This is very important. So, China has been working with Thailand to actually create a land bridge right here, just like Panama Canal. Okay, so China has been trying to work with Thailand to develop this Ranong region right here to connect the Gulf of Thailand to Andaman Sea. So this way, China won't have to go all the way into Strait of Malacca and then get into the Indian Ocean right here. See, otherwise China will have to take this long way from here, then go here, do all that. Okay, but because of the development of this land bridge, which is not yet developed, or it's all in planning stage. But remember, you cannot just wait for the problem to start in order to fix it, right? So this is why China is worried, because now, if even if this is built, India is sitting right here. So, for the same reason that China was trying to bypass Malacca Strait, that reason is not getting fulfilled. Why? Because China was trying to avoid Strait of Malacca, because in case of problems, India can simply choke the whole entire Strait of Malacca. Okay, right here. So China has been trying to bypass it, but at this point, after the tri-service command here, China won't be able to do anything from here. Okay, and also, the way I'm looking at it, based on what I'm looking into and research, I think that India will actually will get involved into the development of this land bridge rather than China. Okay, so that's why China is worried, because China sees this losing opportunity going away from it. Okay, so that's one concern that China has. All right. Now, once the maritime architecture is in place, the next step is what? Next step is strengthening Indonesia's own defense capabilities, which is exactly where the next point that is worrying China comes into play. That is BrahMos and Astra agreements that come into play. Now, what exactly is happening here? See, building security architecture requires more than just geography. We talked about that. And it also requires ability to defend it, right? You may have geography, if you cannot defend it, then it's pointless. So that's exactly what India and Indonesia are now trying to achieve. So during Prime Minister Modi's visit, what's happening is that Indonesia moved forward on acquiring BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. Now you have to understand that BrahMos is supersonic, and in BrahMos has hypersonic variants too. So there is a difference between uh, hypersonic ballistic missile and hypersonic and supersonic cruise missiles. You have to understand the difference here. Okay, so why is that? Because cruise missile is all about the engine, whereas ballistic missile actually uses the gravity to get into the attain the hypersonic speed. Okay. Now coming back to Astra, Astra is beyond visual range air to air missile. Now this missile actually can be retrofitted into Sukhoi 30s that Indonesia has. Okay. Now now I'm going to explain you the whole entire game here. Okay. Now entire game is this. Now let me again take you back to the map. What I said earlier, I said that this was India's plan from the get-go, that uh, that use these island chains as aircraft carriers. Okay. Now this is something India has already developed. Now, if you see here Sabang port, right? So India is going to develop the Sabang port, which is 100 kilometers away from India's own backyard, right here. Okay, the Indira point right here. Now, so what exactly happens when you develop Sabang port right here? Then Sabang port becomes the extension of this whole Andaman Nicobar island chain, which means that Sabang is not just gonna be some random port. This is gonna be militarized properly. Okay, this will be militarized. This will have Indonesian Navy. This will have Indian Navy here. So you will see that. So what's happening is from all the way from Nicobar to Sabang, and then probably up to here, up to some part here in this whole entire thing, they will militarize it. Okay, and this is how they're going to secure this whole entire region. Okay, now here's the interesting thing that I want to tell you. The interesting thing is that um, India has sold. Okay, India, let me actually share my screen real quick again. All right, so India has sold BrahMos and Astra. Now let's say the deal is final, so India has sold. That's what I'm gonna use. Okay, and Interesting thing is that just last year, India signed the same kind of defense pact with Russia, where 3,000 Russian soldiers can be deployed on the Indian soil, and Russian warships can be docked on the Indian ports as well. Now you see the connection, the whole entire connection here. Hmm? And this is what actually makes this whole entire game even more interesting. That uh, um, that that Indonesia is operating Russian platforms. Russia is offering the platform. India operates Russian platforms, and India and Russia, they both manufacture the parts for those things, and now they have this a rock solid interoperability architecture. What interoperability really means is that different militaries can communicate, share intelligence, and conduct joint exercises. And they can also coordinate logistics, and if required, they can work together during regional crisis. So in other words, I would say that India is not simply exporting missiles. India is actually integrating Indonesia into a broader Indo-Pacific security architecture centered around what? Strait of Malacca. And you see the great game here? And in this architecture, it's not just in India and Indonesia, it is Russia also. Russians are also involved in it. Okay, this is a long-term game. And you have to understand that the game is not just about tackling US is least of the problems. You have to understand this. Russia's main problem is not United States or NATO. Russia's main problem is China. China's growing power is Russia's main problem, even though Russians may not say it. But Russians have faced war with China in 1959. So they know this, that bigger fish is always ready to eat the smaller fish. If you have watched the intro of my video, what does it say? Middle power must come together. If they're not on the menu, they are on the table. You have to understand this, okay? So Russia doesn't want to be on the table. Sorry, Russia wants to be on the table and not on the menu. Okay, menu meaning that you become the food. All right. So that's the game here. And so the India, Indonesia, Russia is involved into it too. So all this is gonna sooner or later come into play along with UAE, then along with the European Union. And this is why from the get-go I've been saying this thing, that mark my words, eventually European Union will learn to get along with Russia. Okay, that's how it's gonna play out. And with this security architecture around the Strait of Malacca, what it's going to do is that this will shape the calculations of both China and United States for years to come. Now, this reason, the reason number three is very, very important, because this is directly tied to India's previous government's mishap and misadventures and all the bad economic policies. What that is India's bilateral trade with ASEAN countries. Let me share my slide real quick, okay? So India's trading partner wise, if you look into India's trading partner ranking with ASEAN countries, number 4. Okay, bilateral trade between India and ASEAN countries is $130 billion plus. And India's trade deficit with ASEAN countries is what? $40 billion plus. So, and ASEAN isn't just a strategic region for India, it is an economic opportunity India is currently losing money on. And the deficit means that India's imports far more than its exports, right? And reversing that requires exports, investments, and integration into ASEAN's supply chain, even capturing share from China. China's trade with ASEAN countries is almost $980 billion. Now imagine this. This kind of dependency is actually allowing China to bully these countries in the South China Sea. You might have seen this thing that Chinese ships all the time, they go and mess with Philippines, sometimes they mess with Vietnam, sometimes with somebody, sometimes with somebody. They keep doing this thing, right? So ASEAN countries are also fed up of this whole thing. And what they're saying is that it's time to uh, fix this vulnerability that is caused by this trade dependency with China of $980 billion. So now India is emerging as a viable option to China. So now, if out of that $980 billion trade, now India can go and take a good chunk of it, say, let's say $300-400 billion even. I'm not saying the full $980 billion, but even if India's trade can rise from $130 billion to $400 billion and goes into trade surplus instead of trade deficit, that too in national currencies, then it is golden for India and it is golden for ASEAN countries. Why? Because ASEAN countries will be able to manage that dependency, will be able to tackle that vulnerability, right? And that's why the trade with ASEAN countries becomes very, very important. ASEAN countries are normally very much underestimated actually on paper, but they are the greatest trading partners you can have. And India has realized this thing now. Up until now, the previous governments, they thought that these are all small countries, they cannot give you the trade volume and this and that. They never looked at the numbers. But when you look at the number of China with the ASEAN countries, that should tell you something, right? And that's exactly what is happening here with ASEAN countries. So definitely somebody will be worried, right? Somebody will have to worry that uh, uh, somebody, who that is, that somebody is China. They will have to worry about losing their trade, they're losing their business. They cannot bully. Why? Because India is selling BrahMos to Vietnam, India is selling BrahMos to Philippines, India is selling BrahMos to Malaysia also. You notice that India's Prime Minister Modi was in Malaysia as well. Okay, Thailand, Singapore, right? Indonesia now. So all these countries are there right now that are in support of India. And what's interesting is that when you look at the map, you find that most of these countries are actually, look at this. Look at this. What do you see? Let me share my map here real quick. Okay, what do you see? Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia. Then you have Indonesia right here, whole entire Indonesia right here, right? Brunei, Philippines. If you look into this whole thing, you find that they are actually mostly, it is easier for India to trade with these countries, a lot easier for India to trade with these countries than for China. But because of India's past policies, this never actually happened. It I mean, what India did is that Indian government, previous Indian government, they signed the pact, they signed the free trade agreement and all that. But what they did is they used that in that free trade agreement to import stuff from ASEAN countries rather than exporting their stuff to ASEAN countries. Okay, and that's what created the trade deficit. All right. Now let's talk about the last reasoning why China is worried, and I think this is gonna be the nail in the coffin for China. Okay, and that is this: the nickel, the resource security that China has been utilizing. Okay, this whole resource problem. The problem is that nickel and rare earths. Indonesia isn't just some random ASEAN economy. It possesses world's largest nickel reserves. It produces 40% of world's nickel. So And what is nickel? Nickel is indispensable for electrical vehicles, battery storage, stainless steel, advanced manufacturing. Now, if India wants to uh, be in the top two, top three of the advanced manufacturing, now India is in top five though, but India wants to be in top three. Then India needs all these things. India needs to secure all these resources, right? So, and what Chinese companies did is Chinese companies have invested billions of dollars, almost 30 to 40 billion dollars in Indonesia's nickel industry, building smelters, refineries, downstream processing facilities, all that. So now Indonesia wants a backup plan for all this. And the backup plan is what? Backup plan is India. So that the dependency that's there, that dependency can be sorted out and it doesn't become a vulnerability for Indonesia. Okay, and this is how the whole entire thing is, and this is why Prime Minister Modi's visit to Indonesia is very important. Okay, so this is it for this video, guys. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do like and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys in another video. Take care.